Jordan Raanan, ESPN.com. NFL Nation covers the Giants, who many believe are the favorite to win the NFC East. But with that offensive line, it's not a gimme. Have any of those answers, Jordan, been answered in this preseason and in training camp? Is that line going to be any better?
Well, first off, Vegas doesn't think they're the favorites. So that's still the beloved by Eagles fans and Giants fans, Dallas Cowboys. Still the favorites, regardless of what's going on with Zeke. A little bit over the Giants, but so they're still up there. Can't forget about them. But, yeah, you know what? The Giants, when you talk about them, that offensive line is still the big concern when you talk about this team. There hasn't been a ton this summer that has changed that because you know what the reality is? The offensive line last year, which was one of the worst in the league, the Giants are returning the same 5 starters from last year. So we have to be realistic and say, look, how much can this line actually improve, right? Like they can improve. They're not going to go from bottom 5 to top 5 in the league. You know, the absolute, in my opinion, ceiling for this team is offensive line-wise is, you know, sufficient / average. So if that's what you're looking for, you'd have to be awfully optimistic to think that's the case, I think. And more likely is that, you know, this is something that's going to rear its ugly head once in a while. I mean, here's the thing, right? When you have a shaky offensive line and you're playing teams in the AFC West, which they are, and the NFC West, right? The Cardinals have a very strong defense. The Seahawks have a very strong defense, right? Then you talk about the AFC West. I mean, you're talking about some of the best pass rushers, edge rushers particularly, in the league. When you're talking about Khalil Mack, Von Miller, Justin Houston, right? From the Chiefs, right? What did he have? Did I get his name right? Is that his name right? Justin Houston?
Yeah, and you're bringing up a good point that the fact that they're going to face a lot of elite pass rushers.
Yeah, I mean, hey, not just them, everyone in the NFC East. But the thing about the NFC East is, look at every team's left tackle in the NFC East, right? You got Jason Peters, you have Tyron Smith, and you have Trent Williams. And then you have Eric Flowers. I mean, you want to talk about, like, you know, top of the mountain to the bottom right there?
Right.
I mean, you're talking about a massive, massive, massive distance between the first three guys I named and then Eric Flowers. I mean, Eric Flowers has struggled badly his first 2 years. He had times this summer where he also struggled badly. So, you know, I mean, and then to have to deal with the guys that I just named. I mean, and D. Ford, you know, Justin Houston, Khalil Mack, Von Miller. I mean, it's going to be a tough grind, and the schedule is much harder this year for the Giants and really the whole NFC. And it's going to create a really interesting division this year.
Yeah,
and none of them are walkovers, right? I mean, that's the thing. Unless the Redskins really go into the tank and Kirk Cousins is on his way to San Francisco already. Then, you know, there's no walkover in the division either.
No, and one thing is, as you mentioned, the schedules for everybody got a lot more difficult because the Giants made the playoffs with this offensive line, but it might not be good enough to make it a second year with the same offensive line, but they did make some improvements. Number one, how does Brandon Marshall help this team, and how does he fit in?
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Marshall, obviously, he has that size. I'm standing outside the facility right now, and for some reason he's going home, and he's taking an Uber home, so he's walking outside, and, you know, he's standing, and he walks next to me. I mean, the guy is just massive. I mean, he's huge. I don't think you really understand the size of this guy until you really see him. And Justin Pugh made a joke last week. He's like, yeah, you know, someone asked him why they thought the running game could improve, and one of the things he said was, we have wide receivers who look like offensive linemen. That was basically hyperbole, but that's saying, God, Brandon Marshall is just a huge human being. So there's 2 reasons that comes into play for the Giants and should really help this team, right? One is he's a great red zone target. There's no player in the league who has more red zone touchdowns over the last 4 years than Brandon Marshall. That size comes in handy there. And for a team that struggled like the Giants last year, I mean, they struggled badly to score points. 19.4 points per game, right? Do you know the only teams that finished behind them in points per game last year were basically the 5 or 6 teams without quarterbacks? Cleveland, San Francisco, Jets. Like, you name the teams that have no quarterback, those are the only teams that scored fewer points than the Giants last year. So Brandon Marshall should help in that regard. And another thing, a little under the radar, is the fact that Brandon Marshall really subbed out for Victor Cruz, right? Victor Cruz was never much of a blocker. So in the starting lineup, they just added Brandon Marshall, who's known to be a very good blocker. So they think that could help them in the run game, which should be important because they had problems in the run game too, which ties into the offensive line. They were 29th in the NFL last year, so they need to improve in that category. And they're really banking on Brandon Marshall helping and the signing of tight end Rhett Ellison, who's a significantly better blocker than anyone the Giants have had the past couple of years.
Jordan Raanan with us, talking Giants football as we preview the NFC East. And since you're talking about the running game, Jordan, people want to know who's the main guy that's going to carry the football in New York this season. Easy question to answer, right, pal?
They only want to know because of their fantasy football teams, but I will definitely humor that and say that I would not be especially high on any of the Giants running backs for fantasy football because here's how their running back rotation kind of works, right? Paul Perkins, second-year guy out of UCLA, he's going to be the main guy. So he's going to start. He's going to get most of the carry. He'll get more carries than anybody else. But then they have Shane Vereen, who's going to be used as the passing down back still. Kind of the same role he was in before. Before last year, he really didn't play much because he tore his triceps twice. And then they're going to throw in Orleans Darkwa in the mix a little bit, potentially in the red zone to take away some touchdowns from Paul Perkins. So you really got three guys that are in the mix right now. And then they have rookie Wayne Gallman, who's kind of in reserve for now. We'll see what happens. When you're in the Giants running back rotation, at some point, it seems you enter the mix every year. This has kind of been the way it's been for the last 3 or 4 years with this Giants running back core. But Paul Perkins is the main guy. He catches the ball okay out of the backfield. He's elusive, but he also, I think last year, his longest carry was 22 yards. So hasn't proven to be a real big play guy yet in the NFL. So it's not something. You look at the group as a whole, and if you line it up with every other group in the NFL, you're kind of unimpressed. So, and the fact that they're going to use a lot of different pieces and a lot of different parts and a lot of different situations and leaves you very unenthusiastic about the group.
Well, unenthusiastic about that side of the football, but how about the other side of the football, Jordan? Is the Giants' defense as good as we saw last year? They really seemed to hit on a lot of free agents. Everything sort of came together. And can we expect to see that again, an encore from that defensive unit? Will they be as good as last year or maybe better?
Yeah, now I'll gush over the defense right after I was just down on parts of that offense, is that I really think this defense has a chance to be a special unit. I mean, you're talking about a group that in its first year together, right? Because they really slapped it together last year with free agents and some new pieces here and there. And really, when you do that in the NFL, it usually takes time for that stuff like that to come together. And that's usually not the recipe for building great defense. You look at the Seahawks and most of their top pieces came from the draft. The Ravens all those years, most of their top pieces came from the draft. The Giants did it differently. And it was a really good group last year. They allowed the second fewest points in the NFL. And you could easily make the argument that they should be an even better group this year. And they're not old. The only player, actually they have two players over 30, is Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie and linebacker Jonathan Casillas. So their main players on that defense are still young and in their prime. That's the thing. They signed all these guys as free agents, but they were all 27 and under. So they're going to have a little run. They should, barring injury, have a little run with these guys. And, they made a couple additions or changes on defense, but, again, positions that they probably should be even better than they were last year now. I mean, they had Kelvin Shepard, who's kind of like a journeyman linebacker who's not even on a roster now as their starting middle linebacker. They have second-year guy B.J. Goodson in there now. Looks like a young player who has potential. A second-year safety, Darian Thompson. He's going to be starting at free safety. He's taking the place of Andrew Adams, who started 13 games last year as an undrafted rookie. So, those are two spots where they can upgrade. They lost one guy this offseason. It was defensive tackle Jonathan Hankins. And so maybe they downgrade in that area. But you can easily make the argument in their second year together as a group and with those other two changes, that this defense is even better than last year. And I think this is where the Giants rest their hopes, and their hopes lie in that defense being a good, great, even special group.
Jordan Raanan covers the Giants, ESPN.com's NFL Nation. Giants and Cowboys kick it off on Sunday Night Football. We know we'll see one star, Ezekiel Elliott. Will we see the other star, Odell Beckham?
Yeah, this is if I had to guess, I would say yes, but it's not going to be something that's known, I don't think, until Sunday night. Like, Odell Beckham hasn't practiced now in 3 weeks. He's still in practice today. And I know some people have been, oh, he's fine. He's definitely going to play. Look, when you haven't practiced in 3 weeks, there's a reason for it. The Giants aren't just, you don't, play a game with the whole world and not practice the guy for 3 weeks, right? And everyone in the world saw with their own eyes you saw his leg buckle in, right?
Yep.
I mean,
it was ugly.
He got it was ugly. He got smashed. I mean, his leg went inverted. It was inverted. And so, he suffered an injury. Seems very likely that it's a high ankle sprain, which takes time to come back from. And what I think is going to be the case here is the Giants are going to have to make a decision, right? And their medical people are going to have to make a decision. He's going to be close, right? Because we saw him do a little running today. Nothing major, but he did some running. Not at, on the side of practice with a trainer. But the Giants are going to have to make a decision. If Odell Beckham is 80, 90%, are they going to medically clear him to play? Because this is a long season. And this is sometimes an injury that can linger when you have a high ankle sprain or a bad ankle sprain or whatever it may be. But is it worth it for them? Is it worth it for Odell Beckham, who's also trying to get a new contract, by the way, to go out there if he's not 100% for the opener when they know there's at least 15 more games left and the Giants are hoping there's even more than that? So I think that's the decision that it's going to come down to because it's going to be close. The clock is ticking, and it's going to be close to whether or not he's ready or by Sunday night when they get to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, he wants to play, right? This is the Dallas Cowboys. This is prime time. Everyone in the world is going to be watching. It's week one. He knows that. This is a game that every player wants to be in, right? I mean, if you're in the NFL, this is the kind of game you want to be in. You know that all the attention's on you. This is a huge game. It's a division game. The Giants beat the Cowboys twice last year. The Cowboys won the division. Really, you know what? The Giants were the only team to really beat the Cowboys last year in the regular season. They didn't play in Week 17 and kind of gave away that game. They finished with 3 losses. Their only 2 losses were to the Giant team. So that rivalry is building. The two sides have been talking a little trash back and forth. So there's a lot of reasons for Odell to want to play. But the Giants also have to be careful of whether it's worth it for them long term.
Jordan Raanan breaking down the NFC East, the New York Football Giants. They open up the season Sunday night against the Cowboys, ESPN.com, NFL Nation. Jordan, man of the people. Thanks, pal.
Hey, you got it, guys. Anytime.